Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very special webinar about new technologies and export-import system. We have a couple of very special guests today, but before we begin, I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Patty Azar. Patty Azar, she's the founder and CEO of a Vision Alignment company. Vision Alignment Company is a highly competent company that specializes in consulting and training C-level employees to achieve higher business results. Today's webinar will be broadcast by Patty Azar radio show, Magnificent Leaders. Patty Azar, to you.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman. How are you?
Good afternoon, where I am. Where are you?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot it was a good day. I am in Phoenix, Arizona, the sunny state out here. So wonderful to see you.
Good to be here. Sorry we had a little technical difficulties.
Oh, listen, that's just the way life is now, right? You understand that because you're all over this globe. So, Chairman, would you please provide us an overview as your role as Chairman of the Export-Import Bank of the United States, and also what value your bank brings to our U.S. companies and exporters?
Sure thing. So the Export-Import Bank of the United States, we're the trade bank of the United States. There are about 85 export banks around the world. Many countries have them. Almost 70 countries have different trade banks. We were started by FDR during the Depression. And our goal then, as our goal today, is about supporting U.S. jobs, providing financing when the private sector is either unable or unwilling to do so, frequently for small businesses or some marginal markets, and also making sure that when U.S. companies compete against foreign competitors, they're on a level playing field. But let me talk for a minute just about exports. Exports are up. July, our most recent numbers, we did about $183 billion worth of exports. And to give you a little perspective, when President Obama announced the National Export Initiative in 2010, in the month of July, we did about $150 billion. So we're up about $30 billion on a monthly basis, month after month, since 5-6 years ago. And we are much more of an export nation today than we were at the beginning of this term when I took the job. Exports now are in the $2.3 trillion level. They were up from about 1.6, 1.5 trillion at the beginning of the term. So we're much more of an export powerhouse than we were just a few short years ago. So what the Export-Import Bank of the U.S. does is we are, in a nutshell, we would say we reduce risk and we unleash opportunity. So let me tell you what that means. And I actually have a company that's actually right out in Arizona in Phoenix, a company called ServerLift. And sure. like the name implies, it's owned by a man named Ray Zuckerman and his family. I've met his wife and kids. And when you think about a server for your computer, if you're a small business or in a larger company, they're heavy. They weigh about 500 pounds. So Ray and his company developed something called ServerLift that carefully lifts up a server, puts it into place, or changes it out. These are, they're less than $10,000. It's a great American product. Ray onshored the manufacturing from China to the US and makes them right there in Phoenix. And what we do is we provide him with insurance. So when Ray sells his serverlifts overseas, he can sell them, he can take the same way he sells a customer in, say, Turkey or United Kingdom as if he's selling a customer in California. What do I mean by that? Net 30, sells on net 30, net 60 days, so providing credit essentially to his customers. The difference is it's more difficult to extend credit when you're selling overseas, and that's where we come in. We provide insurance so we can insure that receivable. So when Ray is selling to customers overseas, we insure that receivable. The way he has fire insurance, theft insurance, health insurance, we give him credit insurance. He pays for it, and that ensures that he can ship overseas, give his customers 30, 60, 90-day terms, and sleep well at night knowing he's going to collect. So that's a way we reduce risk. We have reduced the risk of selling overseas, making it as risk no greater risk than selling to California or New Mexico from Arizona is selling to Turkey or to selling to the United Kingdom. So that's a big piece of what we do. And 90% of our customers are small businesses. And that's probably the largest single product category we have at the bank, that credit insurance. Let me give you two other examples and we can open up for some questions. So one is when we're providing credit insurance, sometimes we have a product that needs financing in order to make the sale. And that's the part of our tagline we refer to unleashing opportunity. I'll give you two examples. I was just at a conference on sub-Saharan Africa and Africa exports just this week and last. And we have a company called Weldy Lamont right outside of Chicago. It's an engineering firm. And they got a contract to electrify a lot of rural areas in Ghana. More than 1 million people in 1,000 villages, setting up transmission lines and a power grid. A $350 million project. We provided a loan to the government of Ghana so they would buy from the U.S. They have a choice of buying from China, Germany, many other countries. We obviously prefer they buy from us, so we create jobs in our country. So that's another example. And the last example, I even have a little prop to show you. I don't know if it's going to show up on screen. This is a satellite, a model of a satellite, company called Orbital. This is a satellite company. We have 4 satellite companies in America, basically. And we compete primarily with France. France and the US are the 2 major satellite manufacturers. This is a model. This is a Geostar 3. We have done a number of financings for Orbital. In fact, over $600 million worth of satellites in the last 5-6 years. It's a company right by Dulles Airport. And when we are selling satellites, they also need financing, and we want to make sure we have a level playing field between the US and France. And satellites tend to be a little complicated to finance. They have a degree of risk attached to them. So in this case, we provide buyer financing. Buyers, we've sold satellites to working with Orbital to Spain, to Mexico, to Azerbaijan, provide a credit loan guarantee. They can purchase a US satellite. And I think we can all agree, I'd rather them buy them from Orbital in the United States than buying them from France. Oh, I almost destroyed that satellite. There we go. So those are the 2 examples. Reducing risk with credit insurance for small businesses primarily, unleashing opportunity where we can provide buyer financing for customers overseas.
Well, Chairman, you answered part of my question is just your enthusiasm and your conviction to really support our great country here.
Well, I agree. I feel that.
I can tell you love what you do, and that's why you're so successful along with the bank. You were so kind to give us the statistics regarding the exports and the increase in exports. In this hyper-political season that we have now, what has that impact on jobs for the United States citizens here? And what kind of jobs?
Sure. Well, I would say 2 things. Our report card at the Export-Import Bank is purely about jobs. We are focused on U.S. jobs. What we do is our financing is limited to the U.S. content on a number of products and services such as satellites or the Weldy Lamont or, frankly, the server lift. When Ray moved this company to America, creating more U.S. jobs, we're able to finance those exports overseas. Last year, although we had a lapse for 3 of the 12 months in the last fiscal year, we supported 109,000 U.S. jobs. This year, we are still lacking a quorum on our board, so we could not do the satellite transaction that we did a year or 2 ago. We could not do the project with Weldy Lamont for $350 million in Ghana, as we did in the past, because we no longer have a board quorum that requires Senate confirmation. So the result, last year, 109,000 jobs, and that was a light year for us. This year, only 37,000 jobs. So we're having a real live job impact by not having a fully functioning Export-Import Bank.
And then when you say that too, what type of jobs are we talking about?
Well, the key thing is, if you think about the 3 companies I mentioned, and we'll start with Orbital, these are highly skilled, solid middle class and technical jobs. These are really good paying jobs. The things that we export are infrastructure, airplanes, aerospace, electrical components, locomotives, powertrains, the kinds of jobs that are solid jobs, come with benefits. These are not minimum wage jobs, these are middle class jobs. So these are very desirable jobs. And what we often forget, a good example would be, well, I mentioned the word locomotives. You know, we're one of the premier exporters of locomotives globally in the freight field. Something probably a lot of people don't realize. We have two of the star manufacturers of that in the country, Caterpillar and General Electric, make the sort of gold standard when it comes to locomotives. Well, you buy a locomotive, it may cost you $2 or $3 million, and you know what? It's sort of like Gillette and the razor blades. You're going to spend another $2 or $3 million to maintain that locomotive over the next 20 years.
Just a starter kit, yes.
Exactly. So it's like when you buy a car, you know, the purchase price of the car is just the beginning. So what's important with these exports is they've got a long tail of jobs that they support for year after year, decade after decade after the first sale's made.
Wow. And so, you know, talking about those misperceptions that you may have, especially when you were so kind to tell us about not having the quorum, can you tell us about what are some of the misperceptions out there regarding the bank and its impact on exporting?
Well, I think one of the misperceptions is, one of my favorites, that sometimes we're considered, why are we subsidizing U.S. companies? We don't provide a dime worth of subsidy. Let me just explain what we do. First of all, we are governed, the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, said governments can involve themselves in supporting exports as long as they follow two basic rules. One, there's an agreement amongst the 35 developed countries that we will charge a minimum fees and guidelines how much we can provide in financing. So you have to follow that rule. And number two, you've got to be self-sustaining. Can't get any subsidy from the government. So we actually, what we do every year, and we've done certainly since I joined the administration, we actually send money to the Treasury every year. We collect fees, put aside loan loss reserves. Congress allows us to retain roughly $100 million to run the Export-Import Bank. And the excess, which you and I would call profit, the federal budget, they call that negative subsidy, which is an odd word. Government subsidized going negatively.
Right.
So last year, we sent the Treasury on October 2nd or 3rd, whatever that Monday was, $430 million in cash went to you, the taxpayers. That's the profit we make. So one of the big misconceptions, oh, this is costing money. Actually, we generate money.
Interesting.
And we support U.S. jobs.
And I also love, and I'm really, my heart feels good listening to you because it's not just about high tech. We're actually manufacturing some very heavy goods out here and still have a great global presence, is what I'm hearing.
Totally. We're only number 2 to China as a global exporter. And a little over a dozen years ago, in 2002, we were the largest exporting nation on the planet Earth. Right. Nobody exported more goods than us. And that's 12, 14 years ago. We can do that again. There's no reason in my mind why we can't be the number 1 exporter and reap all the benefits from those jobs and that balance of trade benefit by being the number 1 exporter again.
And what would be the role of that bank being able to close that delta there?
Well, our role is primarily in 2 places. One, small businesses. We know that they generate a lot of the net new jobs in our country. So companies like Servalift, making sure they've got the financial tools to go toe-to-toe with foreign competitors on one hand. And the other thing we can help close the gap is make sure companies like Orbital, I'll show you that little satellite again. Here it is, flying around. Make sure that a company like Orbital or Weldy Lamont, when they're competing against the French or the Chinese or the Germans, that they've got a financing package to match their competitors so we get more jobs here in the United States. We can do this. You know, I was just told you I was working in Sub-Saharan Africa. Less than 1% of U.S. exports go to Sub-Saharan Africa. The opportunities there are enormous. It is one of the fastest growing regions of the world. We need to get in there, but banking is kind of thin. Competition is pretty fierce. You know, China exports more goods to sub-Saharan Africa than we do. India does. The EU does. We're like in fourth place. We got to step up our game and do more exports there, create those jobs here, and we at the bank can provide the financing tools to do so.
That's wonderful. So tell us about the role the bank plays with high tech.
Well, high tech, I mean, I would consider satellite technology communications as part of that high tech revolution. I would say satellites are probably the best example because they're American made, American innovation, American engineering. And that's been a key part of what we finance. We also finance a lot of engineering services. People often don't think of services as an export. There's a power plant being built in South Africa. The entire U.S. content is about $800 million worth of engineering services. So that's another case where we're providing high-tech, state-of-the-art engineering services and design features to build a power plant in South Africa.
Well, so, you know, I've heard so much about the Export-Import Bank in so many areas. How can the Global Chamber help in terms of spreading the word about you being such a great resource for small business and every business in our country?
Well, I'm hoping that's what we're doing today.
Exactly.
I think people don't realize, again, that there are government services that will support their efforts. They don't have to go out there alone. The Commerce Department under Secretary Pritzker does a great job in helping as a matchmaker, helping find customers. If you've got a product you want to export, you can go into your local U.S. Export Assistance Center, and they will help direct you what countries and what buyers might be interested. We can provide the financing for that. Did we just lose the picture?
No, you're there.
Okay.
You are there.
Got it. So I think what we really need to do is keep getting that word out there. We do something called Global Access Forums, similar to what we're doing right here on a webinar, but we also do that in place. We've done, oh goodness, about 100 of those in the last 5-6 years.
So when you talk a small business, what constitutes a small business?
Well, small businesses are, let's be clear, are defined by the Small Business Administration. We don't have the government has one definition and one only that applies. Generally speaking, there are companies with less than 500 employees, but the SBA they have the responsibility, the Small Business Administration, to define that, and that's the definition we use.
Okay. And so what would be some of the top advice you would give to some of these small companies? Number one, it would support our country, it would support you and support the world, about how can they tap into you and what can you do to support them? And, you know, what's the cycle here in terms of if I come to you and I have a computer lift like that, what type of cycle am I looking at?
You mean in terms of time-wise?
Yes.
Well, I would say your first step is to go to the Commerce Department, because if you have never exported, they will help you work together on identifying what markets. Should you be looking at Latin America or Canada or Asia? Where would be a good market for your product and service? So they can provide that kind of on-the-ground expertise and information. What we will provide is the financing. So the first place to go, I say, for a company is talk to your local bank. We have a relation with many banks. Talk to your local insurance broker. He or she may be able to, if they're not working with us, they can work with us and get you credit insurance you can sell overseas. So first stop would be your financial institution. That would be the place to go. A second bit of advice, you need to have a web presence. If you want to sell overseas, having a web presence so that your customers overseas can actually see your products and get information is key. That's just some personal advice. We're not in the web business, but you need a web presence. Probably taking credit cards is not a bad thing if you're a small business, just to make sure that you have an easy payment term to get started. But Commerce and the SBA the SBA's got offices in every single state. They can provide expertise, and of course the Exim Bank.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So the folks out there that are scared to go into the export market, I mean, they say it's tough enough to compete now in the U.S. What tips do you have for them in understanding how profitable it is?
Well, I would say two things I've learned. One, today, more than when I was started in my family business, people are looking at exporting from the beginning. Their business plans in the first 2-3 years are looking at a global footprint. So that is a real change. And secondly, if you're a little uncomfortable about exporting, you know a good place to start? Canada. You know another good place? Mexico. They're right nearby. Another place? Australia. Places that have similar business practices that we do. There's less of a language issue because many people also in Mexico speak English. So looking at some of those local markets is a good place to get your feet wet first time out of the box.
Well, that sounds like great advice there. But I haven't had the privilege of meeting you. What have I not asked you that you're saying, wow, I really should be able to say this out here in this webinar so everyone can hear it? I think also that both political parties should be using you out there in terms of helping sell this country.
Well, you're very kind. I would say the big misnomer, the thing that probably confuses people, they say, oh, the Export-Import Bank, I'm not big enough. I know they only do 10, 20, 50, $100 million deals. You know, we do transactions as small as $5,000.
Really?
We've been working with a woman who's got a pickle company in North Carolina, and they're often $5,000 transactions. There's a woman named Lisa Howlett, has a company that makes laces that are used in like baseball mitts and on dock shoes.
Sure.
Sometimes those transactions are $800 to $1,500 we insure. So we can do much smaller than most people realize.
That's remarkable. Chairman Hochberg, I know that we were so fortunate to have you for this time today. I know that you got a team behind you saying, you know what, you got your next meeting. Just from the Global Chamber and from myself, I really sincerely thank you for your time and for your enthusiasm. Thank you so very much.
Well, thanks for having me on the program, on the webinar.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't know, do I do something?
Thanks so much.
So Tatiana, do you want to get your other folks on the webinar?
Yes, I have already here the.
Wonderful. Why don't you introduce all these great folks you have here?
Okay, here with me we have Kenneth Goodwin from Genesis Company. He's one of our speakers, and here we go.
Yes.
Kenneth, how are you?
How are you doing today?
It's wonderful to meet you. I read your bio. I said, wow, what a bio you have here. Do you want to give us just an overview in terms of what you do and the value you bring to the market?
Sure. Kenneth Genesis Capital Markets. I'm the senior managing principal of the firm. And essentially what we do at Genesis Capital Markets, you probably heard with Fred Hochberg, who I met on several occasions down in DC and here in Queens. We focus on targeting firms that are mature information technology firms that want to do foreign direct investment in Asia. We also work in Africa as well as in Latin America. So we do foreign direct investment, but we also do outbound direct investment coming from the Asia areas into the US. We also do a capital raising for firms, and we try to target firms that are the mature small medium enterprises. Those firms tend to be anywhere between 1 to 3 million in terms of revenues. And we also like to touch the middle markets in terms of capital raisings, and that's anywhere between 10 million to about 30 million. On the back end of what we do, we co-partner with the Korean Exchange as well as the Tokyo Stock Exchange in identifying firms that want to list on the exchange. So we work hand in hand with a lot of small media enterprises here in the US, and they tend to be what we call the frontier information technology market. So these are firms that are working on artificial intelligence, blockchain, green technology, 3D technology, all the technologies you can think of in terms of fintechnology and so forth. So we tend to focus on those types of firms in terms of providing them with the right capital financing so they can operate overseas.
Well, I know Tatiana was so excited about you being on the program simply because you have such a wonderful depth and breadth of you in the organization, in your organization. So could you also tell me, and could you expand on some of the information that the chairman provided and how you augment those type of services and what wisdom you could share?
Sure. I'm kind of biased with this, Patty, because I actually know the chairman.
Well, good.
Which is good. And actually, we had a discussion on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. I think Chairman hit it right on the nose when he mentioned about the fact that small businesses are 90% of the job growth in the U.S. And what we find today is that we find that the small companies do want to do business overseas. So that's one of the things that we do. We help to identify with the Department of Commerce. We do work with the Minority Business Development Agency as well as with the ITA in terms of matchmaking. So we do matchmake, we do identify firms who may want to operate overseas. And on the back end of that, we also provide the capital for that. So when Chairman Hochberg speaks about the notion of small businesses, it's very critical that these small businesses get the advisory assistance as well as the capital assistance to grow overseas.
You know, I'm just still shocked that that he does, and you can do such small businesses and such small transactions. To me, that's really enlightening and heartening that small business really can start to expand outside the U.S.
Exactly, Patty. And in fact, he's right with Africa. Just recently, Japan, the Prime Minister Abe was in town, and Japan just allocated about $9 billion towards Africa. So now $9 billion NB. So
yeah.
the Japanese realized that their strategy had to change somewhat. If you recall, in 2007 or 2006, the Japanese came out with official development assistance, and they kind of retrenched back in terms of what they would do in terms of in regards to Africa. And China strategy became a lot more aggressive. So what you find in Africa, you find a lot of Chinese investments. But the Japanese realized that's a space, it's a frontier market. So they came out with $9 billion in terms of dedicated investments. So there's an opportunity for a lot of the small medium enterprises to kind of co-partner. And the key word there is strategic partnerships. So Chairman Hochberg was right on the nose in terms of working with the Department of Commerce, ITA, NBDA, in terms of matchmaking and with opportunities in Africa as well as in Latin America, and Europe, and Asia.
Well, Kenneth, now I see why Tatiana is such a superstar at the Global Chamber. If all of her members are like you, no wonder she's such a winner here. She's so smart to have you here. Thank you so much for providing that. Seriously. Thank you. And we have another member a Dallas member, Ben Klumek. Hello, Ben. How are you?
You need to unmute yourself. Ben?
Ben, unmute yourself. We want to hear from you.
Okay, sorry. I guess I got muted. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. Karina is just one of my favorites out there with the Global Chamber, too. So we're so excited. And I know that you add a lot to her chapter there. And you're in the trade export insurance and business. Is that correct?
That's correct. So when Chairman Hochberg was talking about the financial services firms, the insurance brokers, and the lenders, that's where I step in.
Well, so he gave us some great information. Add to that for us from a practical viewpoint, being out in the field here.
Sure. So the biggest misconception about the Exim Bank is that it's a bank. It's primarily focused on insurance and on helping exporters mitigate the risk of selling internationally. And to the businesses that are out there, that's probably the largest product that they have. And my role is to help support businesses of all sizes. So he talked about the pickle company, he talked about the baseball mitt company. For us, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how small they are. Typically, the smaller businesses are great because they end up becoming big businesses.
So how did they find you?
Well, so I've been in the industry for about 18 years. I was a broker with Exim Bank and then also a small business lender, a private lender for 12 years. And then I went to work for one of the largest credit insurers in the world for 6 years and recently went back to the broker and financing side. So our role now is working with banks and working with exporters. So typically people find us through the Global Chamber, they find us through their bank, and then through word of mouth.
Well, that's wonderful, wonderful. And I understand that I'm so grateful that you took the time today so that you can support Kenneth, so Kenneth can support the chairman, because it seems like everybody's in lockstep. If we know who to call and we know how to mitigate a lot of these risks, folks out there can really step into that export field.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the key, like the chairman hit upon, is no company is too small to start exporting, and no company should shy away from doing business with Canada, with Mexico, our closest trading partners.
And then also it's not just goods, but it's services too. So that touches me because I'm a service company. So I've got great opportunity out there.
Absolutely. And also, just as an alternative as well, the SBA also provides an export financing tool where Exim Bank may overlap. So, for example, the SBA has an export guarantee product for lenders where the product may not be more than 50% U.S. content. They may be, 70% content. 30% content. The SBA can step in as well. So the U.S. government has a lot of tools accessible to exporters to help grow their businesses.
Ben, thank you so very much for your time and for participating and sitting here with us and really adding some great value. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Patty.
You're
Thanks,
so
Tatiana.
welcome. Now we're going to hop across the pond to Irina Ashkenazi. She is the Executive Director of London. Hello, Irina.
Hello. Welcome to Global Chamber London.
Oh,
Hello. Do you hear me?
It's wonderful to hear from you. And it's we're so excited about you being a part of this because there are a couple issues. Here we are talking about the U.S. and exporting. We want London to take in our exports. So we have a couple of questions here for you. If you would provide an overview of the impact of Brexit and your thoughts regarding the high-tech market in London.
Thank you very much for your interesting question. As you all know, the impact of Brexit is not well known yet. But what we obviously can say that this is exciting and challenging time for all businesses and for high tech as well. We all know that it was quite strong depreciation of sterling, which made improvement to UK trade deficit, and it was driven by the rising British export competitiveness on the market. So British goods and British exports are now more competitive because of weak pounds. And we can see that British trade increased, and the US is the main UK top export partner, exports free in 3.7 billion pounds in July 2016, which is a bit less than in June, which is a bit less than the previous period, but still very huge amount. The US is the biggest partner of the UK, with European Union, of course.
Do you have your phone on? Do you have a phone on? Can you cut a phone off because you're breaking up? Let's see if that's better. You got such great information there.
And actually, the experts are divided in their view. For example, one of the prominent German businessmen, Matthias Döpfner, told Times Today that, in his opinion, it's the great thing which will happen to British economy, and then British economy will be in 5 years' time much stronger than any economy in the European Union. Other experts are more skeptical, but what will happen, we will know only in future.
Irina, I am so sorry. We can't understand what you're saying. I'm so sorry. We're going to have to move on. We'll catch you at another time. We will blame technology for that. We won't blame you, okay? Thank you for trying with us. Thank you. Kuntal, hello, how are you in San Diego? Be sure you're not muted. Hello, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? How is everyone else? Well, I hope.
Oh, we're having a great time, and you know, this has been a really great webinar because we heard from the chairman of the Export-Import Bank, and you are Kuntal Warsick, the executive director of the Global Chamber chapter in San Diego. You have a great background to continue to add some real value to this webinar. Talk to us about your background.
Well, I can certainly talk about my background, which is primarily in the area of global communications and program management. I myself have been a small business for many years, working across borders, but I think what's even more interesting is what's happening here in San Diego, that we've become very intimately involved with as part of Global Chamber. And so I'd like to talk just a few minutes about what's happening here in terms of small business expansion and trade and investment, and what we're doing here also with Exim Bank in the western region. So if you don't mind, I'd love to say, say a few points on that.
Add more wisdom. That's what we're here for. Perfect.
Great. So just to give you a snapshot of what's happening here in San Diego, some of you might know that it's been named one of the world's smart cities by National Geographic, and that's largely because San Diego is in somewhat of a confluence between the research sector and all of the higher education that takes place here. And then it's really an incubator of sorts as a city. And so you can imagine that, there are a lot of startup, it's a startup industry, and it's an innovation economy. So that's very, very exciting. I think one of the things that's also been very interesting is that it has a very well orchestrated innovation economy that's led by the city and the Economic Development Council. This is due in large part to the JP Morgan and Brookings Institution Global Trade and Investment Program that was put in place in 2014. And so what the region has realized is that it has to boost its regional global competitiveness. It acknowledges the important connections between FDI and international exports, that these are mutually reinforcing roles. And so they've entered into a multi-year collaborative process with these two organizations and local partners, and particularly small businesses and startup businesses. Which is very, very exciting. It does have a vibrant startup environment, and it has active venture capital and angel investment funding landscape. But a lot of those resources are being used to develop and roll out technologies domestically first, with the hope that companies will eventually get acquired by multinationals. And so that's, in a way, the way that exports are happening in San Diego. Not across the board, of course, but largely because of the innovation economy. That's the way that exports are happening. But at least what we're trying to do here, along with Exim's Western Region office, is that we are trying to get some of these smaller businesses, not startups, because we know that Exim doesn't necessarily work exclusively exclusively with a startup, they must be showing revenue, and they must have been in operation for, I believe, 3 years. So what we're trying to do is get those companies, the young companies, to know that there is a market internationally where they may be able to take things to the next level before they actually try to get situated and settled domestically. So I think if there's one message from San Diego, it's that we're trying to get the message out that, it's much easier to do this than it may seem. And I think to just sort of end our part of this conversation, or our perspective on it, a lot of people, one of our members actually who's in commercial real estate describes San Diego as global business in San Diego as a lot of bees. There are a lot of people doing a lot of things, and but they're not in a cohesive space just yet. And I think the city, along with Global Chamber San Diego and EXIM, we're trying to create that environment here. So thank you for having me here and for being able to share some of our thoughts with you.
Well, I think this is wonderful, and you added tremendous wisdom, and I love hearing that about San Diego, since it's only about 4 hours away from here. I'll have to come see you and have lunch. And then also, I love the fact that everyone who has been on this webinar talks about breaking the mystique of exporting. And so, which takes me over to the founder and the CEO of the Global Chamber, which is Doug Brunke. Good morning, good afternoon, Doug. How are you?
Speaking of mystique, I see. That nice segue. Very nice. Thank you very much.
I have to tell you, I don't know if folks realize what you've put back behind here, because I really should have said founder, visionary, president, everything, because this is your life here coming out of DuPont. You were there for all those years and were fortunate to travel the globe, and then you understand the real importance here of import export. So I hand it over to you, and I just thank you for me and everyone on this call.
Well, thank you for your kind words, Patty. Yes, I think for those of us that have been deeply involved and involved in any level with exporting, the points that have been made are very important. It is scary, even for somebody that's been doing it for a long time. And, there's a lot of different moving parts. And the one thing that we keep going back with, obviously, with the Export-Import Bank is the safety that it provides to get paid. Everybody wants to get paid, and when you ship a product or you do a service in another country, very often the question is, am I ever going to get paid for that thing I sent over there or that I did over there? And the ability of the Export-Import Bank to, at a very low cost, ensure that you will get paid, even if things go sour, and even if all of your due diligence was done and it still fails, they're there. And they'll get you paid. And so that's why they play such an important role. They fill another little niche, a very important niche for exporters, and relieve another worry. So that's what we're all working on. And I'm just so pleased that we've been able to see different aspects of that here in the conversation today.
Well, what I love about it is that all the work that Tatiana has done in putting all these right people together is that with the Global Chamber, you truly are working towards your vision. You really are working your mission every day. And it's just grateful from a small organization like myself, all the way up to the Boeings and the General Electrics of the world. We all can be successful out in that export marketplace. So thank you so much.
Well, from my DuPont days and big company days, honestly, 20 years ago when I was doing that, I felt very alone. There were those of us that were, in the Japan office and in Seoul, wherever I traveled. Our group in India, by the way, which now is, at the time was and still is a distributor for DuPont, they're helping us grow in India. And so I talked to them, and they would be a recharge of my whole being, like, wow, you guys on the ground are doing it, and you know what's going on there, and there's a lot of moving parts here. And so guess what? Big companies can largely do it, but the small guys, you know, and when I say small, even anything under $1 billion, you know, there's always holes. They have the wrong lawyer, they have the wrong bank, they have the wrong, et cetera, et cetera.
Channel, all of that.
All of those things are there. And so the whole idea behind the Global Chamber is to assemble an amazing team that's here. It's not about me. It's not about the idea. It's about, there's a lot of people with real talent. You know, we started in New York there with Tatiana and Ken and what they bring to the table from New York City. Brandon, I'm not sure has been introduced yet from Blue Marble, but you know, what Blue Marble does is a critically important piece. You got to pay people. You got to pay people by the law, and you've got to be able, you know, to hire really good people and maintain good people. And Blue Marble does a great job with that. The chairman we've already talked about in the Export-Import Bank and the critical role that they play for American exporters. I made a note. I think he said that there were 70 other Ex-Im banks around the world. And you know, Global Chamber is headquartered in the U.S., but you know, we do business everywhere in the world. So when our Kathmandu Global Chamber has a member like they have recently needed to do business in Dubai, we were there to help. So we're all about trade no matter where it is, and certainly since most of us today are in the U.S., that's a high focus. Ben in Dallas and the work that he does, and he explained. Irina in London, you know, in the chapter that she's building and the members that she is building there in London and across Europe are critically important to the network that we have. And Kuntal in San Diego, you know, the work that she has done to bring on a global tribe of talented experts around not just exporting but also importing and EB5 and in foreign direct investment, and you heard a little bit about her talking today. The Asia component is not so much, or Africa is not so much represented here today in this conversation, but they're here because the Global Chamber in 525 metros, you know, anywhere in the world. Australia, actually, a couple days ago, we're getting set up there as well, and so we're there. And so if you're an exporter, recognize that whether it's the Ex-Im Bank, whether it's an attorney that you may have locally or one that we can recommend, or whether it's any one of our executive directors around the world, we're here to help anywhere in the world. And so I thank everybody who's on the call today, and thank you, Patty, for the conversation, because this is critically important. Exporters need to know that they're not alone. You know, in a big company, you know, like I did 20 years ago, you know, honestly, it was really the people in the foreign subsidiaries that kind of kept me recharged, because very often the headquarters was somewhat clueless. I would go back and I'd be the champion, like, guys, we got to do this, we got to do that. And they would not laugh at me, but I think some of you have heard the story where I was told once, Doug, I just want to warn you that you've actually probably become one of them. And
oh, what a shame, huh?
One of them, seriously. You know, it's like, what you mean, like a foreigner, or like, you know, somebody who cares about doing global trade, or I mean, what does that mean? But we all can we can all understand that. All of us in global business know that, you know, there's people that are very comfortable with doing business locally, and anything foreign is foreign, and it's different, and they don't want a part of it, and it's scary, and we have to build walls to keep it out. But all of us who are in the global tribe recognize it's the opposite, that global trade, like Chairman Hochberg said, creates wealth. It brings money into the country so that we can build roads and we can build schools. And how do you do that? You create tourism. You do exporting. You do exporting of products, you do exporting of services, and money comes into our country, you know, whether it's the US or any country, and we sustain ourselves. And so at the end of the day, this is a question of sustainability. Will we sit around in a room and trade money among ourselves within the room, or are we going to step out of our room? And since, especially right now, 70% of the wealth and 95% of the people are outside the U.S., why not tap in? Let's step out of the room. Let's invite them into our room as tourists. Let's bring their money in and as we sell products and services. And the way to do that is surround them with a support structure like at the Global Chamber, so that it's safe and they feel better. They're going to make less mistakes, because mistakes happen. They happen all the time. So how do we reduce it? these are the kind of things that we deal with every day.
Well, I love that because, I was with Federal Express when you were back there with DuPont, and I was a global sales manager, and they said, what in the world is that? So we've come a long way in the last decades of understanding this export of goods and services. So, Doug, I want to thank you. And of course, it's truly my pleasure always to support. But we're not through yet because I've got to take it over and send it to Tatiana because she's got some great people to introduce us sitting around a table.
Yes. We have a special guest, a member of Global Chamber in New York, East Coast executive of Blue Marble, Brandon Rosenthal.
Thank you, Tatiana, and thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. I guess I'll just do a quick overview of what we can help companies with. And there's many challenges clients face and companies that are expanding globally when they're going new into countries or if they have multiple locations, really managing that process. So we are a US-based technology firm, and we provide a single platform for 135 countries to make it much easier and simpler for companies to pay their employees. And it can be anywhere from one employee going new into a country to companies that may have acquired a new opportunity in a new country and they have 1,000 employees in that location. So we really try to create a full strategy for that client when they're going into a country or have different challenges when it comes to moving the money into that country and understanding the really the local tax compliance, the money movement piece, and the payroll requirements. So thank you for having us today. Other information will be at bluemarblepayroll.com.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for watching us today. So sorry for technical difficulties that we had at the beginning. But, no one's perfect, unfortunately. Thank you so much for coming. And if you would like to register and become a member of our big and warm family, please come and visit our website, globalchamber.org, New York City.globalchamber.org. That will be my chapter. You have San Diego, you have London. Just join us.
Fantastic. Great job, Tatiana. And we do have some upcoming events that may be of interest to our audience. If you're an exporter, we have the Vice President of Liberia coming to the United States, and he has an exclusive meeting with Global Chamber on October 19th. So he's looking for U.S. companies who are able to do infrastructure projects. And so they've come to the U.S. and they're coming to us, and they're asking if you're a U.S. company and you're willing and able to provide services and products to Liberia, please reach out to us, and that's October 19th. And find whether it's Tatiana or wherever you are located, check into a Global Chamber, and we'll be happy to participate in that. I'm actually going to be in Asia for most of October as we launch in a variety of different cities, and I'll be actually in Jakarta the week of October 10th in a variety of export opportunities for Indonesian companies. And so if you're interested in doing business in Asia, if you're interested in doing business in Africa, if you're interested in doing business in Europe and you're an American exporter, you reach out to us. We're happy to help. And your success is our success. Tatiana and everybody on the line, thank you so much. Great job. We were able to overcome the technology issues and actually accomplish this. This is a great symbol of international business, right? We had all sorts of trouble. It's sort of like when you're going into a new country. Tatiana is originally, I believe, from Russia, and undoubtedly, occasionally, some things go wrong in your travel around Russia, and then you find a way to be resilient and flexible, and it all works out. So thank you all for being flexible, and Tatiana, particularly you. Thank you.
Thank you. Patty, thank you so much for moderating. You're incredible.
Oh, thank you. I love supporting you folks. Y'all are great.
Bye-bye.